Good afternoon, my name is Sam Krause, and the purpose of this seminar is to actually give you all the tools necessary to be able to eliminate negative emotions within 30 days. Tall order, but I've delivered it already many times. Anyway, so I once had a client who, I'm a personal coach, I had a client who I used to work with on his business, his marriage, and so on. And one day he called me up and he asked me if I could help him overcome his fears. That was interesting. I told him I'm not a psychiatrist or a therapist, and I didn't quite even understand what he meant by fears. So I asked him, what do you mean by fear? Give me a little bit, more clear understanding. Anyway, he said, well, fear. And I used the word, everybody uses the word, but I couldn't quite get a handle on it. So now I had been studying psychology, philosophy, religion, the human potential movement since 1978. And one thing they all agree upon is that the mind controls the intellect. In other words, your mind, your thoughts control your feelings and your emotions. So I knew the answer lay somewhere in that area, but I didn't quite know where. Anyway, so one night I was out to dinner with my wife, and she did what she always does, which is she looked down the menu and she pointed to something and she said, "This looks good. This is what I'm going to get." And I said what I always say, which is, "What do you mean? You're going to get those words printed on the menu?" And she just rolled her eyes like she always did and thought of me as an idiot, and that's what we did every time I took her out to dinner. But then a light went off in my mind, and I noticed and I thought that the thing she was pointing at was really not what she wanted. It was just, it was something, it was a sign, or it was pointing at something that was really in the kitchen, which is really what she wanted. In other words, it was just a concept. And I started to look at it a little bit deeper. And I started to think about emotions and concepts and so forth. And I realized that fear and all the other negative emotions are really just concepts. They're really pointing at something else. So I started to look and see what was it that they were really pointing at. Because that I could get a handle on. That maybe I could help him with. So let's just talk about emotions for a moment. There are two types of emotions. Okay, some emotions can be good for you, some can be bad for you. In other words, fear, as an example, if a car is coming at you at 60 miles an hour, it's good to be afraid. You jump out of the way. That's a good emotion. But when left unchecked, emotions take on a life of their own, and they inflict negative influences on our behavior, and it robs us of our birthright to happiness. Unfortunately, that describes the state many of us are in today. Now, the purpose of this seminar is I'm going to demonstrate to you a unique process of breaking down negativity, even negativity that's been in place for decades. This seminar will equip you with the necessary tools to naturally strip away your negative emotions within 30 days. Okay, ready? Now, everyone think of a negative emotion. Now, everyone think of an incident that caused that negative emotion. Okay, I need a volunteer. Anybody want to volunteer? Okay. Which emotion did you select? You could just call it out.
Angry.
Anger. Okay, very good. Anger. And can you think of the incident that happened that caused you to be angry? Now, if it's too personal, maybe you don't want to say it, but if you don't mind.
Let's see. Some guy cut me off on the highway.
Someone cut you off on the highway. Very good. And what action did you take once that happened?
I honked the horn and cursed at him.
Very good. Okay, so let me make sure I understand. Someone cut you off on the highway, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what did you think about that when someone cut you off? Did you have any thoughts about that?
Like, what an asshole.
Yeah, right. What a bad guy that guy was, right? Very good, right. And right after those thoughts, well, how did you feel about it in your body? Did you have any kind of feelings in your body that those thoughts caused?
It's probably tense.
Tense, right?
Or,
like, could you be a little more specific? Like maybe tense where in the shoulders tensed up and right,
yeah,
the
shoulders.
throat, maybe
Yeah.
the heartbeat went up a little bit,
Yeah, that's
something
all-
like that, right?
All good.
Right. And then you honk the horn.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just go over that again. So a guy cuts you off, right? You think of him as a really bad guy. You start to have all sorts of body sensations, heart rate increases, tense in the shoulders, and then you honk him,
Yeah.
right? That's what happened, right? Very good. Now, did you hear me use the word anger at all when I just described what happened?
No.
Right. See, because anger is just a concept. It's not what really happens. It's like the thing on the menu.
Yeah.
You point to it, you just say, in other words, if I ask you what happened, you're not going to say, well, a guy cut me off on the highway, and then I had thoughts about him, and these were my thoughts, and then I had these kinds of body sensations, and then this. So you just say, oh, I got angry.
Yeah.
So you go through life trying to handle this anger issue. So you get books, you go to therapy, and all this kind of stuff, but you're working on the concept. You're not working on what really, really happened. So really all that happens is something happens, you have some thoughts, you have some body sensations, and then you have an action. That we could work with, that you can work with. I'll give you an example. There's a friend of mine came to me, and he said to me he has a phobia of driving on the highway. So I went through a process with him, and I asked him the same questions I just asked you. And we discovered that when he has an idea about going on the highway, he has certain thoughts and body sensations about it, which result in a particular action. In this case, it's not an action, meaning not driving on the highway. And that we started to work with, which we'll get to in a minute. And by the way, 10 days after I met with him, he called me up, and he says it now takes him half the time to get to work. And I asked him, how'd you do that? He says, no, I'm driving on the highway. And that's using the exercise that we're going to get to in a little bit. So, as I said, we're spending our time working on trying to eliminate these concepts, like my wife pointing at the words on the menu as though she's going to eat those words, where really what she wants is the thing in the kitchen. And that's the problem with, and why it takes so much time, if it ever happens, that we do handle our negative emotions. See, something happens, and then we call it a negative emotion. Something happens, and then we have a negative emotion. Something happens, we have a negative emotion. That's the way we're living our lives today. But really, something happens, we have thoughts about it, body sensations, and an action. So instead of focusing over there, we should be focusing on these things over here, and that will help us eliminate this thing. So we're now going to do an exercise that I'm going to do. We're going to do it once here today, and then what you have to do is do it twice a day at home, once in the morning and once in the evening. And what will happen is, by doing this exercise, you will become desensitized to this concept, and within 30 days, you'll actually get rid of it. Okay, so instead of automatically reacting to the incidences that happen in your life, you'll actually be able to come to a choice about what your action is.